And just as promised, it is my pleasure to have Szymon Kardaś, Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, join me to uncover what's next for Europe in relation to U.S. sanctions on Russian oil and its impact on the economy. Thank you so much for joining me on World News Tonight.
Good evening. It's a pleasure.
So you co-authored a paper, Energy Reckoning, How Europe Can Use U.S. Sanctions to Cut Moscow's Oil Ties. I'm excited to have that conversation and have a deeper dive into how this is going to change the market. So the sanctions are meant to influence the external financial institutions, something that we've seen happen when it comes to the relationship with Rosneft and Lukoil. What was the sanctions impact so far? What has been the impact that we've seen and how it changed the economy here on the continent?
We have to wait what would be the final impact of sanctions because, the effectiveness of this instrument depends on, first of all, the determination to implement it, and it would be very important how Washington, to what extent Washington is determined to implement them. Secondly, it would be also interesting to see how Russia will try to circumvent sanctions, because they are under sanctions, different kinds of sanctions, for almost 4 years, and we know that they learned and they developed different kind of schemes, to circumvent it. And finally, how will Russian partners behave, in terms of helping them to circumvent them? So, yeah.
So we've seen, when it comes to Central and Eastern Europe, we've seen different movements take place over the past few days. We know that certain decisions are going to still be made. Do you think that this particular region is making those adjustments and making those changes and trying to introduce bills quick enough to be able to meet the deadline?
Well, actually there are big question marks, because first of all, we know that Hungary applied for the exemptions, regarding sanctions that were imposed by the US on Lukoil.
We also saw the comfort letter for Germany for 6 months.
This is the second case, exactly. We know that Bulgaria is actually also planning to submit a request for the exemption of sanctions. We know that only Romania actually is trying, to find a solution that would allow them to take control over Lukoil's assets, but without, asking for any exemptions from the U.S. side. So actually, those kind of moves raise big questions about the effectiveness, because actually we as Europeans should use those sanctions as a pretext to get rid of the Russian Federation and Russian oil companies from the European energy landscape. If countries start, to ask for exemptions, it can make the whole mechanism, not as effective as we expected it could be.
So you've mentioned Hungary. I would like to take a closer look at that, because we had the conversation taking place between President Trump and Viktor Orban, and you said that there is an exemption that's been secured. We know about a year. Viktor Orban says it might be longer, that there is no deadline. Do you think that Hungary actually has a real or an imaginary problem when it comes to removing Russian oil? Is there a will to remove Russian oil? We could look at the example of Croatia and Hungary potentially getting LNG from Croatia. So what kind of a dynamic are we looking at here?
Well, actually, the answer is very simple. There is a lack of political will. To change the policy towards Russia. Viktor Orban and Hungary, under Viktor Orban's ruling, is actually interested in keeping the energy ties with Russia in terms of the gas supplies, in terms of the oil supplies. And particularly the oil example is interesting, because Viktor Orban is arguing that there is no physical option for Hungary, to diversify the sources of supply, which is not true. We know that there is a pipeline connecting Hungary with Croatia, and they could import crude oil, using the Adria oil pipeline, and there is enough capacity to do it. So it's basically the lack of political will. We know.
But you mentioned, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned the lack of political will. We look at Mr. Trump, who actually said to NATO countries, he said to the European continent, you need to cut the ties when it comes to oil with Russia, when it comes to energy. And yet we have this conversation between the two, and all of a sudden Hungary gets the exemption.
Yeah, I mean, because Viktor Orban used a very strange argument that, well, since they do not have ports, they do not have access to LNG, for instance, when it comes to natural gas, or they cannot import oil, I mean, through ports. Because
you would think that Mr. Trump would actually have access to
and
information.
It's really bizarre because actually, if Donald Trump was advised properly, I mean, about the current, the actual state of play when it comes to the situation of Hungary, I mean, he should know that there is a physical option for them actually to diversify. So so that's why I said that one of the key factors would be the US determination, I mean, to implement sanctions in a way that would really hurt not only the Russian companies, but also all other countries or companies from other countries that still tend to cooperate with Russians.
So we see, as I mentioned, different movements taking place in order to meet the deadline. But what role do you think Poland is going to play, considering that it has a diversified energy portfolio, it has a diversified infrastructure that could potentially provide for those gaps that are being made and left behind by the Russian oil sector? What do you think is going to be Poland's role?
Well, first of all, Poland is very credible, I mean, in terms of advocating for phasing out Russian fossil fuels in the European Union, because we managed to do it in terms of natural gas in 2022, thanks to the LNG terminal in Świnoujście, thanks to the construction of the Baltic pipeline, and thanks to many contracts that were signed, I mean, with suppliers, with non-Russian suppliers, let's put it this way. And in terms of crude oil, we managed to be completely independent in terms of supplies from Russia since 2023. So we are very credible, I mean, in terms of advocating for it. And of course, I mean, due to the infrastructure that is on the ground and the infrastructure that is coming, and due to the interconnectors that were constructed, I mean, between Poland and Germany, Poland and Lithuania, Poland and Slovakia, I mean, we are in a quite good position also to offer the surplus, for instance, of natural gas that is coming to Poland to the neighboring countries, and also to countries which are neighbors of our neighbors. So so Poland actually should present its strong voice on the European in the European Union, and advocating for the implementation of sanctions and using sanctions as a good pretext, I mean, to speed up the process of phasing out Russian energy companies and Russian energy from the European landscape.
I'm aware that the time on our program is coming to an end slowly, but I wanted to ask you a very quick question right before we go. Do you think that there's still a way that Russia will actually manage to bypass, introduce some bypass strategy? I mean, we've seen the Gunvor, who was trying to purchase Lukoil.
Yeah, quite quickly, but fortunately, I mean, in terms of Gunvor, the U.S. administration did not give consent, I mean, to approve the transaction, because, I mean, the idea was to sell all the foreign assets of Lukoil to Gunvor, which is actually a company closely linked informally to Russia and members of the Russian ruling elite. So it's absolutely clear that Russians will try to develop other schemes, I mean, to keep control over their assets. It's absolutely crucial for the US, but also for the European allies of the United States, I mean, to block any attempt to circumvent sanctions, because, I mean, they might hit Russians really hard, but whether they hit or not depends on the US and depends also on the Europeans and our determination, I mean, to implement them.
Thank you very much, Szymon Kardaś, Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And this would be all the latest news for now, but don't go anywhere, because we have On the Record, where Adam Yasser interviews Annalena Baerbock, the President of the United Nations General Assembly. That's all from me now. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you for joining me on the program, and I'll see you very soon.